1. The Stark family's rise mirrors real feudal dynasties. The Starks are often depicted as noble and honorable in stark contrast to the ruthless political games of other families. However, their initial rise to power mirrors real-world feudal societies, where families became powerful not through honor but through strategic marriages, betrayal, and warfare, just as the Starks do after their fall. Their moral integrity often blinds them to the realpolitik around them, and they're undone by it. 2. The Targaryens' fall is based on historical inbreeding. The Targaryens' obsession with keeping their bloodline pure through inbreeding, marrying siblings, is one of the major reasons for their downfall. This was based on real historical instances, such as the Habsburg dynasty in Europe, where inbreeding led to physical and mental health problems that ultimately weakened the family. The Targaryens' obsession with their own purity led to madness, most notably with King Aerys II, the Mad King, mirroring real-world dynastic dysfunction. 3. The Battle of the Bastards is a reflection of real-world medieval warfare. The Battle of the Bastards between Jon Snow and Ramsay Bolton mirrors real historical battles, like those of the Wars of the Roses or the Battle of Agincourt. The counterintuitive part is that Jon Snow, the underdog, an honorable character, employs a risky, untraditional military tactic by baiting the enemy into a vulnerable position. Historically, many so-called noble warriors and knights were much more pragmatic and willing to use deceptive tactics than idealized in popular lore. 4. The Red Wedding was inspired by real events, but with a major twist. The Red Wedding, one of the most shocking and brutal events in Game of Thrones, is inspired by real historical events like the Black Dinner in 1440 in Scotland and the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre in France. These events were ruthless, cold-blooded political executions disguised as celebrations. However, in both the show and the historical events, the counterintuitive twist is that guests, who should be protected by the laws of hospitality, are instead slaughtered, a breach of unwritten laws that shocks both the audience and the characters. 5. The Iron Throne is a symbol of misplaced power. The Iron Throne, which represents ultimate power, is more of a curse than a symbol of strength. In history, rulers like the Roman emperors or French monarchs often found that supreme power came with an enormous price, whether in paranoia, betrayal, or civil war. The Iron Throne, much like historical seats of power, brings the wielder no peace, only strife. Characters who sought it often fell victim to the ambition it inspired in others. 6. The Wall as a historical parallel to the Hadrian's Wall. The Wall in Game of Thrones is often seen as a great barrier separating the civilized world from the unknown. But historically, structures like Hadrian's Wall in Roman Britain were designed to keep out invaders, and they were just as porous and ineffective in some cases. The wall in Westeros, while impressive, doesn't fully protect the realm from the dangers beyond, much like real-world fortifications failed to provide total security. 7. Cersei's power moves mirror real historical female rulers. Cersei Lannister is one of the most ruthless and calculating rulers on Game of Thrones, but her methods of consolidating power reflect real historical examples of female monarchs like Catherine de' Medici or Elizabeth I of England, who often had to navigate a deeply patriarchal society. The twist is that Cersei's ultimate downfall isn't her gender, but her blind overreach, much like historical female rulers who failed when they overextended their power, relying too much on manipulation and assassination. 8. Tyrion's wit is more dangerous than his physical strength. While many characters in Game of Thrones rely on physical strength or brute force like Gregor Clegane or Khal Drogo, Tyrion Lannister's greatest weapon is his sharp mind. This is a nod to real historical figures like Niccolo Machiavelli, whose intelligence, political savvy, and manipulation were far more effective in gaining and maintaining power than any sword or army. Tyrion's rise is an example of how intellect can be a more potent weapon than muscle in a world where power often stems from social cunning. 9. The Dothraki are not just barbarians, but represent ancient nomadic empires. The Dothraki, initially depicted as savage barbarians by many characters in the show, are based on historical nomadic empires like the Mongols or the Huns. These empires, often seen as uncivilized by settled societies, were in fact highly organized, with intricate social structures and brilliant military strategies. The twist is that the Dothraki are not just mindless warriors, but are a direct parallel to these powerful forces of history, showing how nomadic cultures could often outmaneuver and overthrow larger empires. 10. Daenerys' desire for liberation is corrupted by her power. Daenerys Targaryen begins her journey as a liberator, freeing slaves and fighting for justice. However, her quest for freedom ultimately turns into an authoritarian rule as she resorts to violence and destruction to achieve her goals. This mirrors many historical revolutionary leaders who, after rising to power by promising freedom, ultimately turn into tyrants. The counterintuitive twist is that Daenerys, who sought to break the chains of oppression, becomes the very thing she once despised. 11. The Faith Militant and the High Sparrow mirror real religious uprisings. The Faith Militant, a zealous religious group, mirrors real-world movements like the English Puritans or the Spanish Inquisition. While religion in Westeros appears to provide moral guidance, its manipulation by figures like the High Sparrow shows how religious fervor can become a tool for political power, turning an institution meant for peace into a source of tyranny. 12. The Lannisters' wealth brings instability instead of power. The Lannisters are famed for their immense wealth, symbolized by their motto, "A Lannister always pays his debts." Historically, wealth often secured power, yet in the series, their reliance on money and loans leads to instability, mirroring the fall of historical powers like the Medici family, whose financial prowess was ultimately undermined by overreach and shifting alliances. 13. Arya Stark's assassination skills reflect real historical practices. Arya's training with the Faceless Men seems like pure fantasy, but it parallels historical groups like the Hashishin, an Islamic sect known for using targeted killings to reshape political landscapes. Counterintuitively, their influence came not from large armies, but from small, precise acts of terror, just as Arya's single actions reshape events, killing Walder Frey or the Night King. 14. The Ironborn's love of the sea mirrors the Vikings, but with a twist. The Ironborn resemble the Vikings with their seafaring raids and pay the iron price culture. However, unlike the Vikings who often sought land to settle and assimilate, the Ironborn remain tied to their harsh homeland and sea culture, which limits their power in the long term, counter to the expansionist success of real historical raiders. 15. The fall of the Targaryens reflects the fall of the Roman Empire. The Targaryens' once unquestioned dominance crumbles not from outside invasion but internal strife, greed, and madness. This parallels the Roman Empire, which collapsed under the weight of its own corruption, infighting, and inability to adapt, despite appearing invincible for centuries. 16. Littlefinger's rise reflects real power brokers. Peter Baelish is one of the most dangerous players, not because of strength or wealth, but due to his cunning manipulation of chaos. He resembles historical figures like Niccolo Machiavelli or Thomas Cromwell, who gained power through manipulation and strategic alliances, proving that knowledge and strategy often outweigh swords. 17. The Unsullied are inspired by real slave armies. The Unsullied, a slave army conditioned for loyalty and obedience, are inspired by real historical forces, like the Mamelukes of Egypt or the Janissaries of the Ottoman Empire. Counterintuitively, these historical armies often overthrew or outlived their masters, gaining political power, just as the Unsullied eventually break free under Daenerys' leadership. 18. Robert Baratheon's rebellion is a historical mashup. Robert's rebellion echoes real-world revolutions and wars, particularly the Wars of the Roses and Henry VII's rise to power. However, unlike most historical figures who stabilize their rule post-victory, Robert's reign deteriorates due to his apathy and indulgence, subverting the traditional notion of a victorious rebel becoming a capable ruler. 19. The Night's Watch mirrors religious orders, not just soldiers. The Night's Watch is often perceived as a military force, but its structure resembles religious orders like the Knights Templar or monastic communities. Counterintuitively, despite their noble mission to protect Westeros, the Watch becomes more about exile and punishment, reflecting how some real-world orders fell into decline and corruption. 20. Dorne's isolation mirrors the success of real-world independent states. Dorne's isolation and resistance to conquest, thanks to its geography and culture, mirrors real-world examples like Switzerland or Japan, which avoided being overtaken by larger empires. However, Dorne is counterintuitively destabilized not by outside forces but by internal political schemes and betrayal. 21. The fall of the Starks mirrors real dynastic overthrows. The Stark family's initial downfall echoes the destruction of dynasties like the Plantagenets during the Wars of the Roses. Their adherence to honor and tradition becomes a liability in a world where cunning and adaptability are essential for survival, a counterintuitive lesson in power dynamics. 22. The White Walkers represent real existential threats. The White Walkers' slow advance and the apathy of Westerosi rulers reflect real-world responses to existential threats like climate change or pandemics. Counterintuitively, the true danger isn't just the enemy but the political infighting and inability of leaders to unite against a common foe. 23. Bran's role as king subverts the idea of leadership. Bran Stark's ascension to the throne is highly counterintuitive because he takes no direct action to claim it. His role as a passive observer and his mystical knowledge of history make him a stark contrast to traditional heroic leaders, challenging the notion that power comes only through conquest or ambition. 24. The fall of the great houses mirrors real aristocratic decline. The gradual destruction of Westeros's great houses like the Starks, Lannisters, and Baratheons mirrors the decline of European aristocracies post-World War I. Counterintuitively, the very systems that gave them power, feudalism, alliances, and inheritance, become liabilities in a rapidly changing world. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel if you like this video. Love ya!